Hello and welcome to this week's live stream, where I will be live streaming the second chapter of my book React Projects. In this book you will learn how to build full stack React applications from 1 to 0. Every chapter will be around creating a new project, and this week we'll be building the second chapter. The second chapter is about building a developer portfolio. As a developer, of course, it is important to keep a portfolio, because this way you won't rely on your resume when applying to jobs. Instead, you can just use your developer portfolio to get in touch with new companies. So in this live stream, I'll be showing how to build the second chapter. So let me head over to VS Code, where we'll be setting up our project. For this, I first need to open up a terminal, as in this video, we will be using Create React App to set up a new application. Let me share my screen. In my terminal, I've opened a directory in which I will create my new project. In this directory, I can run the npx command. And let me make this a bit bigger. That says npx create React app, which is the command to start a new React app. And then I would need to supply the name of my new project. And this will be the name of the directory the files will be created in. For this, I will go with developer portfolio. And to use npx and create React app, you need to have Node version 14 or higher installed, and also you need to have npm installed, which usually comes together with Node. Once I press enter, it will start creating a new directory, and in this directory, it will set up a new React project using create React app. It looks like I already have this directory, so to be sure, let me just get rid of this directory first. And then rerun the command to set up a new project in this directory that I just deleted. So this is deleting the directory, after which I'm able to set up a new project in this exact same directory. And it might take some time to delete the files, as there could be many files in there. Of course, we have Node modules that might take up some space on my computer and therefore take a bit longer to delete. We need to make sure all the files are deleted in order for this to work. And as you can see, my files are now being deleted, so I can rerun the command npx create React app to create a new React application in the directory developer portfolio. And this will install React, React DOM, and also the React scripts library, which is used to handle the compiling, bundling, and also the rendering of my React application. And yet again, depending on your internet speed, it might take some time to actually install all these packages, but that's fine. We have plenty of time to do this live stream. And I see we're almost there with installing the libraries. And while we're waiting, I actually can go on with an announcement based on the previous week. So in the previous live stream, I had to give away one of the copies of my book React Projects. And for this, you needed to reply to the question that I asked. So, what is the dependency array in React in a React use effect hook? What is this actually used for? And for this, I had to randomly select one of the people that applied, and the winner for this live stream giveaway was Augusto Cesar. So if you are Augusto Cesar, make sure to send me a message at my email address, which is hello@hackteam.io. So send me a message at hello@hackteam.io if you are a Gusto Caesar 6281. And this means you would have won either a physical copy of the book React Projects or an ebook copy depending on your location. So make sure to go to the previous video and figure out whether you will be getting a physical copy or an ebook copy. For this week, I also will be doing a giveaway. The giveaway for this week will be on Twitter. So make sure to follow me there to stay updated when the giveaway starts. And now I hope my project has finished installing. So let me go back to my terminal where I'm still setting up a Create React app. And this Create React app is almost done setting up. So make me sure to wait a tiny bit longer, after which we will be opening this project in VS Code, where we'll start setting up all our code and all our files. And as you can see, it has been finished now. It took quite a bit longer than it usually does, probably because I'm also doing a live stream at the same moment, and my computer might need a small upgrade. It's always nice to be remembered of having to do an upgrade to your computer when doing a live stream. So we're almost done setting this up. Just as a reminder, if you are a Gusto Caesar 6281, you've won the giveaway from previous week, so make sure to send me a message at hello@hackteam.io, which is my email address. And I believe we're almost done loading here. And I can honestly swear, usually it doesn't take as much time as it does today. So it's probably really because we're live streaming this event, and my computer has a bit of trouble handling both the live stream and setting up a new React project at the same time. So if you're following along with the live stream, or you're watching this live stream from home later on, things should go faster at your end, because it's just my computer being a bit slower than it usually is. Have a look while we're doing this at all the dependencies it's installing, which is React, React DOM, also type definitions for just in case we might be using TypeScript later on, which actually we won't be doing in this stream. And if you know me from Twitter, you probably know I don't really like using JavaScript. Normally I do everything with TypeScript, but for these live streams I make a small exemption, as when writing my book I was still using JavaScript, and well, it would be kind of a waste to rewrite the entire book in TypeScript, while people might be having a better time using JavaScript as you're used to developing JavaScript in your day job. So this is all finished. We have created a developer portfolio, which is on my computer. It gives me the instructions to start the development server, or to bundle the app for production, to run the tests, or do whatever. But first, we're going to be cding into this new directory, which is developer portfolio. And I will be opening this new directory in VS Code, as this is where I will be doing my development. So running the command code dot should open a new VS Code project. And in this VS Code project, we will continue building this application. And as a reminder, this application is also featured in the book React project. So if you have the book, you can code along. If you don't have the book, I hope you will like this live stream so much that you will end up buying the book to work on the other chapters. Because every chapter will be around building a new project. So let me hover over my VS Code project to my separate screen, where we will start developing the application. So here we have our VS Code project running. And we will be using this VS Code project to build our application for today. And today's application will be a developer portfolio. And in this developer portfolio, you can call the GitHub REST API. And using this API, we can show all the projects that you have on your GitHub organization or your personal GitHub account. And we will be using this information to create your personal developer portfolio that, of course, you can extend with additional information. So maybe you'd like to add some projects that aren't on GitHub on there. Maybe you'd like to make a connection between other developer tools, other developer platforms, such as Practical Dev or Hashnode. It's all possible. But first, we're going to be setting up this developer portfolio to work with GitHub. And next to React and create React app, which we use to set up a React project without writing any configuration ourselves, we also will be using React Router. And React Router is the oldest and probably the most popular way to handle routing in a React application. But first, let's start our React application by running npm start. This will create a development server at which we can see a starter project that is basically the React icon with some instructions on how to get started. And create React app is using a library called React Scripts to bundle and render the code. And React Scripts will also handle the setting up of the development server that we can use to view the project in a browser while we develop it. And one of the cool things is it also adds hot reloading, which is useful because that way you don't have to manually refresh your browser when you are opening the project. And for this, we can find the project at localhost port 3000, which will render our project in the browser. And any change we will make in VS Code will be reflected on this page. And while I have the previous livestream open, I'd really like to thank everyone for the whopping 8,000 views for the very first livestream of my book React project. So thank you all for tuning in to that livestream. Of course, I hope you also will be watching this new live stream, but I have no doubt that you will be here again. So let me reorder the desktop pages I have open to make my development a bit easier. So I have my application open in localhost on one screen, and then on the other screen I have my VS Code project. As you can see, everything is compiled successfully, and we can find the developer portfolio in the browser at port localhost 3000. Go back to my browser. You can see there is a React application running. It is a basic React application, of course, because we haven't done any optimizations here just yet. So what I start by doing is we're going to be restructuring this whole application. If we would go back to VS Code and we would go to the source directory, you can find we have a file called app.js, and this file contains the entire application, which isn't the most useful thing if we start to expand on our application, if we start scaling our application, if we start adding more and more components. So what we can do here is we can break this application up into different components. And we can do this in multiple ways. So one thing that you can do is you can create another component inside the app.js file. Let's say we want to make this header element into a separate component. What we can do is we can write a new function. We call it header. And then this function will return our header component. And you can see GitHub Copilot is helping me here a bit, but we're going to be doing it manually. So we're going to be copying over this part that says header, and we will delete it. And then we will paste this part of the code right here, meaning we've created a header component now inside the app component. And then, of course, we need to add our header component here instead of the header element. If you would format this, you can see we have now deleted the header element from the app component and created it into a separate component. And this is really useful if you start adding more components to your application. What we also see, we have a variable here called logo. So let's pass that as a prop to a header component. Let's say this is logo. And then also pass this logo over to our header component right here as a prop. And everything should just work as we saw before. Nothing really has changed because our application is still an application. However, so this will be our new React component that basically has the same code as we saw here on this header component that we created in app.js. So let me copy this and bring this over to this file and make it the default export. So we have function header and let's say export default header. Let me clean up this file a bit and save it. And then inside our app component, we should be importing this new header component from this directory. And if we would go back to our browser, you can see nothing has changed still. We still have a app component. We still have a header component. And we can do more, of course, because we also need to move over the CSS that we have inside our main app.css file. Create another file that says header.css. And let me move over everything we have in here that is related to the header. Which is basically everything. Let's delete it from here and let's add it there. If you would now go back to your browser, most of the styling should be gone, as you can see right here. But what we're going to do, we're going to be importing this file with our CSS rules right in here. And we're going to be doing import of this header.css file. Save it right there. If we would go back here, you can see the application we saw in the beginning is already being restored. So this is all done. And actually there are more components that we can extract from here. For example, this is like a link. This is our href element. We can also change this into a separate component. We're going to be copying this. We go into components right here. We're going to be creating a new file that we call link.jsx. And this will again be a component. We can create function that says link. And from here, we're going to be returning the element we just copied. This one. And then, of course, we need to do a default export of this link component. If you look right here, you can see we have two variables. One variable is the ref. Let me change this into a ref variable. That should be inside the props for this component. And then another one is this thingy right here, which we can maybe call the label or the title. So let's call it label and put that label right there. Oh, not label. And save it. And then we can go back to our header component. And in here we can also import the link. So import link from right there. And instead of having this h element here, we can use this link component that we just created. And then we need to pass it a ref and a label as we set it up right there. Let's get rid of this part here. And now we have created another component inside a component. If you would go to our React application, you can see everything is still the same, except we now have 3 components instead of 2. So we started out by just having a app component, then we created the header component, and now we have the link component. So let's see how we're passing the props to the link component. You can see we have a ref and a label. But there's another thing we can do. We can also pass a child component to it. If we would change this a bit, we can say link. Actually, we're going to be closing the link element. Instead of passing the prop label, we're going to be passing it right in here within the opening and closing tag of the link. So what has changed? If we go to the link component, we no longer receive a label, but we receive children instead. This is a children prop that is available on all React components. Go back to our React component. You can see nothing has changed, but the cool thing is, instead of passing the text from Learn React as a label and a children instead, we can do something else. We can actually pass a component in here as well. What we could do is we can say strong, which, well, helps you to create a bold element, and then do the closing tag for strong as well. You see, we're now not passing a string, we're passing a component instead. So if we go here, you can see this is now being bold, which is a nice way to play with different React components. So that's just how easy it is to set up a small component structure for a React app. And this really gives us the basics to start creating more. So we've now structured our application a bit by creating the header component, by creating the link component. And secondly, we're going to be adding some data to it. What we want to be doing, actually want to be dividing up our application into smaller bits, as we just did. And instead of having just smaller bits, we also want to add more new bits, which are more components that, for example, have your data coming from Github. For this, we will use the Github REST API. And with the Github REST API, you can get data from your Github account, of course. Actually, from any Github account. If I would be closing my React application, I can call the Github REST API using a curl command. So a curl command is a way to send an API request directly from your terminal. You can also open up this in the browser. So what I'm going to be doing here, I will be adding my own GitHub username, which is Dirks. And once I press enter, it will send a request to the GitHub REST API and get all the data for my account in here. As you can see, it shows my username, it shows an avatar for me, it shows some information about the repos I have, it shows my, my Twitter username, which is gethackteam. So make sure to follow me on Twitter as well, with my username, so you don't really have any reason not to follow me there. And we will be using the data from this REST API inside our React application. So we will be creating a component that will take all the data from my GitHub account and display it right there in my React app. For this, let me create a new component. And let me call this component profile, as it will take my GitHub profile information. We'll be calling this profile.jsx. And in here, of course, we always start by creating our component. Say profile. We're not really sure which props we should take just now. And just return nothing this now. Make sure we do a export default that says profile, and maybe just render some div elements there so that we would have something. Okay, so this is my new profile, component. Inside my app.js, of course, I also want to be importing my profile component. So let me do profile, and I'm getting a little bit of help right here from GitHub Copilot. So let me import the profile component inside our app component, which of course is what we want to do. So I'm going to be closing some of the tabs I've opened right here, and also make my terminal a tiny bit smaller. So what we want to do in the profile component is we want to do some data fetching. So we want to have information from our GitHub REST API coming into my profile component. So for this, of course, we need to set up a use state hook. And a use state hook is a way to create state variables in React. And the state variables we're going to be setting up is one called profile with a callback that says set profile. And also make sure to import the use state hook, of course, from React. Otherwise, we will getting these errors that you're seeing right there. And next to profile, we also want to create a loading variable. Let's call that one is loading and make the default value false. Of course, you probably also want to set up some error handling, which we can also do, of course. Let me create another one, says const error and set error. So these are the 3 state variables that I create. And we want to be filling these variables with data coming from Github. For this, we need to set up a new use effect hook that will fetch my GitHub REST API. For this, we'll be adding use effect. Import it from React, of course. And let's just say it takes an empty array to begin with. And in here, we need to be setting up a data fetching function. And let me be lazy and just copy paste this directly from the ebook that I've opened on my screen right next to me. I copied it. Let me paste it down here. So we have a fetch data function. We want to be calling the Github API. Let me use my own username for this. And also set is loading. Clean this up. And we're defining a new function inside the use effect hook because you can call a async function directly in a use effect hook. What I'm doing right here, I will be calling the fetch data function right there. Clean up this file again. So what this use effect hook is doing, it is calling the GitHub REST API. It is taking the results, putting them in the state variables, and we're calling this function right there. And as I said, we probably also want to do some error handling. So let me do a try catch. Put everything we have here right inside that try function. And then also add some catch to make sure that we would be catching any errors. This would be error does message. And then just format and clean it up. If I would save this, I can probably do like a console.log and see if my data is being fetched. But actually, I can also just go to the network tab in the browser and see if my data is being pulled in. So let me start my React application again by running npm start, which will again start the React script setup from create React app and render my application directly in the browser. If I would be going back to the browser, I would be able to refresh this page and see the latest version of the application right there. Which is, as I warned you in the beginning, a bit slower than I'm used to. So please bear with me while waiting for this page to render. But still, the application we're seeing should be the same application. But instead, this time it will be doing some data fetching from the GitHub REST API, where it would get the information that we previously saw in the terminal for my GitHub account. We go into the network tab. You can see there are some requests going on to the GitHub REST API to get the information from my account that's called Roy Dirks. And of course, when you're doing this yourself, make sure to add your own GitHub username to get your own information in there. Okay, so now let's go back to my project. And in here we can see we now have a profile is loading and error component, which of course we want to use to render something on the page. Because otherwise it doesn't really make sense to view this page, of course. So what I want to do here, I want to open up with, of course, wrap these in brackets. And add some tabs there as well. What I want to be doing here is I want to add a h2 that says about me. So this is the title of the page. And then we want to check if the data is being loaded. We want to do is loading, and if it's loading, we want to show the person viewing this page that something is going on, something is loading. And if it's not, we probably want to show a list of some of the information we have in GitHub. So this will just be something like this. And here we probably want to list the name of the user we're loading. So format this a bit, make it a bit cleaner. Now back to our browser. We don't really see anything. And maybe you know why, but this page has a strange setting. It is set to use the entire view height. If I would view this element, you can see it's set to view height 100. Instead, let me just try and set 100%. And that way we can see something is being rendered here right for me. So let's find where we have this code, which is actually in header.css. First, let's make the logo a bit smaller. What do you think of 60 pixels? And then we go here, and of course we change this to 100%. If I would save this and go back to my browser, you can see the logo is becoming smaller. It should be around 60% or 60 pixels actually. And then the rest of the page will only take in the space it's actually using. You can see now we have a smaller logo and we have the header right there. And also we have this list set up that we will start filling with information from the GitHub REST API. So I could go to my profile component, and in here I actually want to start showing some of the data from my GitHub profile. So what fields do I want to show? Well, multiple actually. I want to show my username, of course. Then I also want to share my avatar, which is not a movie, but the picture I have on GitHub. This is my avatar, which will be the variable profile dot avatar.url. So this profile should have all the information that we pull from GitHub, and then avatar URL is one of the variables. Name the same. For name we have the value called login. And then what else do I want to show? I want to show a URL to all my repos, because we will be using this URL later on. Sure, I can also show my location. I want to show my repos. And this would go to repos underscore URL. So you might be wondering where I get the variable names from. I actually have the network tab open in a different screen so I can see what my variables are called. And for this, you can also just go to the network tab right here, from where you should be able to see all the fields that we have available. We'll be going here and we'll go to response. And I'm using Chrome, by the way. You can find all the different fields that are available for this GitHub REST API call. So I have repos URL, I have avatar name, location. Maybe I also want to put my email on there. And maybe also the bio if I have any. We call this one email. And this one email as well. And then the other one should be the bio. We go back to the network tab and see if I'm missing any valuable information. Well, maybe it's nice to mention my Twitter username. For this, we also want to add another one that says Twitter. And then we do profile dot Twitter underscore username. Once I save this and go back to my browser, I should be seeing a list of information that's coming from the Github REST API. I can see my name, I can see my avatar, I can see the location, the list of repos. My email is blank, which is good. Otherwise, I will be receiving emails every day. And also my bio is here, as I am a software engineer, trainer, speaker, and author. And also, of course, my GitHub username, as you can follow me there. This is a list of basic information that we are now displaying directly from the Github REST API. Let me also clean up this header a bit, as it's displaying information that we're not really using. Clean up the header to, instead of having all this, let it just say it's an H1 element, which will make it the most important title on the page. So this is useful for indexing by SEO. Let me call this my portfolio. You just save this. If I would go here to my browser, it should re-render, and you can see it's rendering my portfolio and then a nice React icon. Of course, we can clean this up even more to make the header smaller. Let me find this element, and in here we have flex direction column. Let's say we want flex direction row, which is looking a bit nicer. Let me go to my header.css and also add the updated flex direction here. Let me call this flex direction row. Now we should be having a nice looking portfolio application that lists some information from GitHub, but we also want to list our projects. So for this, we will start creating another component that lists all my different projects. For this, I will actually be copying the profile component and rename that one to projects. If I look here, I have this information with my repos, which actually is a REST API call. So if I would call this endpoint, it will show a list of repos. Let me copy it. And we will be using this one in our project component to render a list of my repos, which are basically my projects. And let me rename profile to projects. I can basically just change all occurrences and rename profile to projects. Oh, it went faster than I thought. So I now have a projects component that's getting a list of repos and then displaying them right here. And probably we should change this title so it's not about me. It is my projects. And then probably the return will be slightly different. So let me just comment this out and save. If I now go back to my app component, I want to be rendering my projects component here as well, next to my profile component. And save it right here. If I would go back to my browser, it should now show the header, a profile component, and also the projects component, where the profile is getting information from GitHub, and the projects should be getting my repositories. But before I can get my repositories, I need to make sure that I'm rendering correctly over the data returned by the GitHub REST API. Let me see what the return looks like. As I already thought, it is an array, meaning that I would need to use a map function to map over the data that is returned from GitHub. So what I will be doing here is I'm going to be going to my projects component And in here, I have my UL. What I want to do here, I want to do project map. And then from here, I want to be returning information about my project. It should look a bit like this. I can delete this. I'm getting an error. I'm not sure why. I should probably close this one with here. Let me update this and then see what other fields are available. So I have an ID and I also have a name. Let me just render the name of my repo, which is also the name of my project. What else can I do? I can show the stargazers count. I can show the language. And that should be fun to show. So in my Li element, I can render the name of my project, which would be, let me call this name, project name, a description. And maybe I also want to do something like language. We should render project.language. Let me just save this and go to my browser. And here you can see a list of projects being rendered next to my information from my Github portfolio. And for now, I also want to add some styling as, well, this isn't the most prettiest looking application. And of course, your portfolio should be something that's quite pretty because potential companies that you might want to work at are looking at your portfolio and consider if they want to hire you, yes or no. So let me go back to VS Code and start adding some styling to this. If we would go and we start with our profile component, we have a list here. Let me just give a class name to this list. Say class name is, and let's call it profile slash list. And also add something right here to our div element. Let's say class name profile container. And then every single Li element, we can also add a class name there. Let's call it list item. Copy it and put it at every Li element. Format this and save it. So we've now added some class names to it. And then of course we need to add some styling as well. So for this, we will be creating a new file that is called profile.css. And in here we need to add styles for the container and for the list that we created. So for the container, let's set some width attributes and add some margins as well. Of course, we also want to be styling our list. We can do profile list. What I want to do there, we probably want to set the list style to none. So it will delete those ugly list elements, which are the tiny circles you see. So we had circle, we want to go for none. We maybe also want to add some padding. Let's say I want to add some padding to the bottom, because that way we will have, or actually we just want to be adding padding 0. Probably it's just easier to do 0. And then what else do we want to do? We probably want to say the text should align left, but maybe that's a no-brainer. Go back to the browser and see if anything has changed here. Well, it should, or actually it shouldn't, because we still need to import our CSS file right here. So we need to import and then say profile.css. Now it should import the CSS file and we should see some styling updates right here in the browser. So what else can we do? We can probably pimp up some more stuff. So let's go to the different list elements. Call this list item. And maybe you want to make those into flex containers. So let's say display, make this flex, and then justify contents, say space between. Then this on its own doesn't change much. But if we go to profile, what we will be doing, we will be adding elements around here. So we can say strong, as we want to make this into a strong looking text. Just quickly try and put it everywhere. Say strong, which makes this label in bold. And close it right there. We have to do this individually because, well, otherwise it's going to be turning into one big disaster. So now we have all these fancy looking labels. Probably want to get rid of the colon as well. Doesn't add much value whenever we're using this nice styling with our strong elements. Use it for bio as well. I kind of forgot it right there. Let's say this is a 2. And make sure we don't forget our Twitter list either. If I save this and go to my browser, things should be looking a bit better already. See, it is now in bold. All the information is being rendered slightly differently. I still have one thing that I can fix though. I have an avatar, which is a picture that I should be able to render. So maybe I want to do this right here. Use a div element around my UL, because the UL is really for listing different things. Let me create a image that's using the profile avatar. And I should be able to delete this one right there. See what it looks like. Now we have a fancy looking picture of myself. And actually what I always like to do is, maybe it would be nice to make this into one of those round ones, which you usually do, create a round circle, the same as I have right down here in my YouTube live stream. I can also have a round circle around my avatar. Say last name is, just call this profile avatar, and put the image right in there. Closing tags, and save this. You can see it formatted the entire document. I would go here. We just copy this, and then say profile avatar, and in here I want to set the border radius, and I believe you want to set this to something like 50%. See what's going on. So we have our profile avatar. Looks like it is being styled. We probably want to set a border as well. So border 1 pixel. Make it a solid black one. And also make our image. You probably say that the image is display inline. I don't know. Maybe this should be a. So if you want to make this a round one, we have the image inside the div element, which is good. To actually make this a round image, we probably need to add some extra attributes. Let me see, we have the border radius set to 50%, which should be a good start. So what else should we add? thinking out loud here. We might need to add it to the image itself as well. So let me go back to VS Code. And something I can do right here is copy this and use the right arrow and say image. And there we go. We now have a round image. And probably we also want to set the width to something smaller. Let's say maybe 200 pixels. Let me see for height, automatically just as well. Nice, that's great looking. Cool. I'm kind of happy with this so far with the profile section. So let's continue by styling the projects as well. And for that, we're going to be going back to the profiles.jsx. You can see we have our list right there. And we have our div element right here. So similar as what we did with the portfolio, let's also add some class names here. Let's call it projects container. Same as we've done previously. And let's also name these things. So this is my UL projects list. And then right here, I have a projects list item. Save this. What I'm going to be doing, I'm just going to be lazy again. And I'm going to be duplicating my profile.css and rename this to projects.css. That way I can just rename all the occurrences of profile and rename that to projects. I don't have an avatar, so I can just get rid of all the avatar thingies. My list item, I probably want to be using a flex direction of a column. Because I don't want everything to be displayed side by side. Instead, I want it to be listed below each other. And then, of course, I'm forgetting again to import the CSS file right in here. So let me run import projects.css. So now you can see the styling is a bit different. You can see all my projects being listed one by one. I maybe want to add some margins between everything. So let me go to projects, CSS, list item, and let's say I want to add a margin bottom of, let's say, like 20 pixels. And probably if I go into this thingy here, I maybe want to get rid of some of the labels. Maybe even use a H3 element for the project names. And then I would have my description, which could be just like a paragraph. And then maybe my language could be a paragraph as well. As you can see, I'm just using all the elements that HTML gives to me. I can just say, it could look like this. Back to my browser. You can see it's already being approved. We have our different projects. Maybe what I even want to do is I want to add a border for list item. Let's say border 1 pixel, make it a solid one, do like a light gray. And then maybe I also want to add some rounded corners just because it looks fancy. So that's pretty cool, right? We now created a developer portfolio that is taking information from GitHub. It shows my default details, like my name, my location, my email address in case I would make it public, my bio, and also my Twitter username. And then it's all on one page. Instead, we want to render these components on different pages. So we don't want to render an app component that has a projects component and a portfolio component, or the profile component actually. Instead, we want to have pages in here. Let me go back to VS Code and close all the open files I have. I'm going to be stopping my application for now and clearing this. And what I will do, I need to install React Router. So with React Router, which we can just install with npm, we can set up routing for this application, no matter the React framework or library you're using, because React Router works with all the different libraries. So let me run npm install React Router, which will install the latest version of React Router, which currently is version 6.7. And while this is installing React Router, let me quickly go over the components we have. We have a header component, which is rendered on every page. We have a link component, we have a profile, and we have a projects component, which are both components that are displayed in its main app component. And if this stream might be lagging while you're watching it live, well, hopefully it will get better. There isn't much I can do on my end, as I'm supposed to have fast internet, but then again, you never know. So while my React router is installing, let's also have another look at the app.js component, which is where we're rendering everything. So we have our header component, we have the profile, and we have the projects. And then in our index.js file, we have set up a React component, which is also running in strict mode. And then also, we're using a report web vitals function to make sure that we are reporting on all the critical web vitals. So this is actually useful if you try to debug the performance of your React application. Hopefully, React Router will be finished installing shortly. And then I hope it will be installing faster at home for all the 116 people currently viewing. So thanks for all for tuning in to this live stream where we're creating a React developer portfolio based on the second chapter of my book React Projects. While we're waiting for this last bit to finish, I can already tell you a bit about where we will be adding this router. So we'll be adding this router to our app.js component. Or actually we won't. We will be adding this router to our index.js component. So in the index.js component that is open right now, we will be loading all the different applications on the different routes that we are setting them to. And as it looks like the installation is getting a bit quicker now. Well, you never know what will happen in a live stream. Usually, if you record these things before, everything goes fast. And when you're doing a live stream, it's always not as fast as you would expect it to. So if you're live streaming this right now, I hope your internet speed at home is better, and you might have already installed React Router before my installation is finished. So please bear with me a bit longer. This is the only application we will be installing today. So as soon as this application is in, we are done for the day, and we only have to look at the code being rendered in your VS Code and in the browser instead of having to wait for installations to finish right here in our terminal. And while we're waiting, I'd love to hear where you're watching this live stream from. So me myself, I'm currently in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. From previous live stream, I remember people tuning in from Brazil, from France, maybe even from the US. Probably not India because it might be a bit late over there. But if you're from India and you're rewatching this live stream, well, I will be in India actually in 1 month. So I hope to meet you there when I will be in Delhi. And I'm going to be giving this installation a few more minutes, well, hopefully seconds, but, well, I haven't seen any downloads going as slow as they are today. So sorry all for that part of the live stream. It looks to be speeding up right now. So hello, welcome for tuning in, Joe. Hopefully you're bearing with me while we wait for the installation to finish. It should be, well, maybe just a few more seconds. And then we can continue by setting up React Router to handle routing for our app, which currently looks like this. We go back to the browser. You can see I'm rendering a portfolio page. I have information from GitHub, my user details, and then all the GitHub repositories that I have are being listed right here, including a description when they have one, and also a notion of the language they're using. As you can see, for me, it's mostly JavaScript, or actually TypeScript, as most of my JavaScript projects have been being refactored to TypeScript. Go back to VS Code. I was hoping it will be finished right now, but unfortunately it isn't. Just going to be giving this a few more minutes, or hopefully seconds, but, well, you never know. So if you're building along with this project and you don't have a GitHub account set up, it might be good to know that you can also use the username called OctoCat. And OctoCat is the, well, you might know him from the GitHub stickers. It's the guy that you see, or a girl, or... So yes, thanks for noticing, Mohammed. In the next live streams, I will be using TypeScript, but for now we're using all the information from the book React Projects, which was mainly written in JavaScript. But yeah, it should be quite straightforward to start using TypeScript instead. We didn't use much data fetching right now, so it should be a easy change. It looks like my library is just being installed. Right here. So I've just installed React Router version 6.7, which we can now use to set up routing for our developer application. We have an application that looks like this. we have a portfolio page, we have our information coming from GitHub, and it's split into two different components that are now being rendered all on one page. And what I want to do instead, I want to render this on different pages. If we would go to the React Developer Tools, you can see we have a header component, a profile component, and a projects component. What I want to do is I want to create separate pages for the profile and the projects. And maybe you want to even create a detail page for the different projects. I've just installed React Router. I would add my configuration for React Router to the index.js file. And this is the main file. This is the file where my components get mounted to the HTML element called root. In here, I need to import my information. So in the index.js file, I need to import my settings from React Router DOM. In index.js, I will be importing the information from React Router DOM. I will be importing create browser router, which is a function to set up a new router object. And I also will be adding the router provider, which is a component that I use to wrap my React components. I will be using that right there. So what I want to do with create browser router, I want to create a router object, which will look like this. So this is a router object. And in here, I want to map the path, the main path slash to a component. And I want to mount this to the component app, which is my main component. And it also means that in here, I need to use my router provider to wrap my entire application. I will take this router provider and put it right here. Or actually, like this. And then I pass my router to it, and I should be able to just save it. I'm getting an error here because I need to use a closing tag as well. If I save this and clean it up a bit, I can start my React application by running npm start, which will start a new development server and then render my application to it. As I'm just rendering the application, the component app on the main route, it should still look the same as we previously saw. It should be one page that shows a GitHub portfolio with some main information coming from GitHub, and then also all my repos listed as projects. You can actually see we have an error. Or probably because we installed React Router and not React Router DOM, which is a rookie mistake. So let me go back and run npm install. Clear this up. Let me run npm install React Router DOM, which should install the library React Router DOM, which is the React Router library maintained by the Remix core team. And this will install all the dependencies that I need and able to set up routing for my React application. And while this is waiting, I'll be gone for just a tiny second, so please bear with me. So I've just installed the library React Router DOM, which is currently at version 6.7.0. And in the index.js file, we added the create browser router function and also a router provider. And these are coming from the React Router DOM library. And we've mapped the app component to our path, to our welcome path, like the slash. And then we also added a router provider that's being rendered by React as our main component. So what the router provider does, it will map all the paths that we have added up here and show them in your browser whenever you're visiting the path that is listed down here. What I'm going to be doing now, I will run npm start, which will start my development server and renders my application in the browser. In the browser, you should now see a React application, which is still the same application as we saw before. Because the only thing we did, we added a router, but we didn't really add any new routes or change any of the components being rendered. So the rendered components should still be the components that we saw before. You can see we still have an error here. Figure out what's going on. There is an error rendering. I probably know what's going on, so let me go to the network tab and quickly confirm that what I suspect is actually the issue. Because it's one downside of using the Github REST API, it has a rate limiting. So you can only call the API an X amount of times within a certain time frame. Otherwise, you will get some errors because, well, they don't allow you to infinitely render the REST API. Let me also have a look at the error reading map. Go back to VS Code, go to my projects where I'm using map. Maybe in here we should see if projects exist. And also make sure that projects is an empty array when we first load the page. Let me quickly refresh because it is using hot reloading, but sometimes whenever you get an error, you need to manually refresh it yourself. So cannot read properties of null, reading effort-ordered URL. It's another place where I need to check for any issues. As someone is saying in the chat, very friendly, so thank you for that. We need to prepare for a situation where there might be any errors getting the data. Like this. And then save it. And we shouldn't be getting any real errors now. We should just see an empty application. Getting some errors here. I also need to add a question mark right there. Now we have our portfolio again, and we have the data that we requested. So why did we saw those errors? It's probably because the first time we're trying to render this page, the data isn't there yet. Although the isLoading function should prevent this from happening by setting the loading to false by default, we should actually set the loading to true by default. And now we should have been all right, and be able to render this page. So we've installed React Router DOM. We've set up or create a browser router function. We mapped it to the elements/app, and then we use the router provider to render this application in the browser. And as you can see right here, the application is rendered on the main page. If we would go here, it doesn't really have a component linked to it. So that's why we'll get an error that the application doesn't exist, because we didn't map a component to this route. We go back here, we can see we have a profile, that maybe we want to render this profile on a separate page. What we can also do, we can render the project on a separate page. So let's try and do that. Let's create another path for our projects and map it to the project's component. We're going to be duplicating this. We call it projects, and then we link it to the component called projects. Of course, we need to import it as well, and the import is added right there. So once I save this, still nothing has changed for our main file. It should still look the same. We should still have the same application showing the GitHub details and projects on one page. But now we can also go to the URL/projects, which should render a list of all our projects. But as you can see, it doesn't have the same header as we saw for the previous page. So what we can do, instead of listing it right here, we can add a child page. And for this, we would add children right here, and which is an array. And in this array, we can paste the block that we had before with the path/projects. So what it will do, it will render the projects component inside the app component. But for this, we need to make one other change. We need to delete the projects from here, as we want to put this on a separate page. And we want to use a outlet component instead. And the outlet component should be imported from React Router DOM. This is called outlet from React Router DOM. And then we need to render it right here. So what will happen? The outlet component will be replaced with the component that we linked up to this child path. Go to the browser now. You can see whenever we go to projects, we can see the About Me section and also the different project section. But we probably want to separate this as well, as we only want to show the portfolio details, like this main block with the About Me, the profile section, when we go to the main route. For this, we go back to VS Code, where we need to create another child route. Which we set up like this, and we just call it profile. Of course, we need to import profile here as well. Import profile like this and save it. And then we go to our app component, where we should also delete the profile component, as it's now being rendered by React Router. Go back to our browser, you can see we have our profile on the main page, and then if we go to /projects, we have a list of all our projects. But of course, we want to add a link from here to our projects as well. So we can go to profile, and in here we can import a link component from React Router DOM. Do import, and then we say a link. from React Router DOM. And in here, in our profile, we can just add a div element. Make it slash div there as well. And we can use our link element there to slash projects. And then name this view my projects. Now, if we would go to our main page in the portfolio, you can see that we have a link to go to projects, which will bring us to the list of all the different projects. And something else we can do is show the individual projects whenever you click on it, because now we don't really have any interaction here, because maybe we want to show some more details about the different projects whenever you click on them. For this, I'm going to be creating another component, and I will just be copying the projects component that I already have, and I'll be naming this project detail. And for this, I can just call this project detail as well. And I will be renaming set project to a single project, getting just a single project here. And for this, I need to have some more information. I need to actually use my, let me quickly find this. To get an individual repo, I need to use the repos GitHub REST endpoint. And then I also need to provide the username of myself in this case, and then the name of the repository. Yes, so for this I need to have github.com/repos/username, and then I should have a variable here called name of the repo. And of course I need to use template literals, because otherwise I can't really use this variable in here. But how can I get this name to get all my projects? For this, I need to clean it up a bit and render a single project there. Maybe just add the name to it. And then I want to list my project information right here, like the description and the language. I'm just doing some cleanup there, as we don't need to do a map function. We don't need to do a lot of other things that we had to do before. Just going to be rendering this div element. Project detail, and you would have a name, which is something in the beginning, and then we need to return project detail right here. Now we have a project detail component as well. So let me close all. So we already have created a main path, and then we have a path that returns the profile, which is also the main path, and then we have a project. But what if we also want to return a single project? For this, we will be creating a new path that is inside this children's option for create browser router. And in here, we're going to be adding a parameter, which is the name. And then a returned element is called project detail. And this component, of course, we need to import from its location. So once we save this, nothing really should change. Besides, we now have a project detail component that could get the parameter using using a hook from React Router DOM. But first, let me just go here and type in something like, let's name this project something and see what's get rendered. So you can see it renders the project something, but no data fetching is being done. Because we need to use a React Router hook in order to get the argument from the inner project detail component, we need to use a hook from React Router DOM to get the argument with the name of the repository. For this, we need to import use params from React Router DOM, and we can call it in here, so we can run const param and then use params. If I will be deleting this and we go back to the browser, we still have something which is being passed down from the URL to here. But of course, we want to be using a real life project name instead. Let me go back to the project's overview and also to the project's component that we have here and set up a link to the project detail. For this, we need to import a link component from React Router DOM. And then right in here, before we render our list element, we need to use this link element to link to a specific project. And of course, we need to make sure that we wrap the entire component to it. And then we also need to add the key to the main element whenever we're mapping over an element using map. If I format this and save it, we can go back to our browser where you can now see everything is underlined here, which of course you can delete by adding some CSS rules. If I click on it, I should be redirected to a new page with the name of the repository that you can also find right here being rendered. But of course, we also want to make sure that we get the correct information from the Github REST API. Let me quickly inspect using the network tab to see if we're getting the right information in. Let me refresh the page to see what data is being collected from the Github REST API. And as you can see, it seems like no data is collected at all. So go to project detail and make sure that we have set up everything correctly right there. So here you have a fetch data function that should be called whenever name changes. Right here, we would have name, and then we have name right there. So we need to make sure that we pass this name to the use effect hook. So now the data is being called. However, it seems like the endpoint we're calling doesn't exist. So we need to make sure that we have all the correct information in there to get information about this specific repository. So we have api.github.com/repos, user, and then the name of the repository. So this should be correct. api.github.com/repos. Let me actually go back to the previous page, and then we have the network request that shows all the specific repos. And here we can actually find the URL for the API right there in the return of this, and find it right here. So let me see what's different by copying this and going to our setup right here. So we have repos, repo name, The name should be going in correctly there. So maybe instead of name, we need to use a different variable. Or maybe it is the slash at the end. So let me get rid of this one. And now if I would click one, you can see the data being loaded. This is quite cool. So now we have our portfolio application. You can see a portfolio being rendered, or actually a profile being rendered. You can click on to all your projects, and then you can even explore individual projects even better. And in here, you could even add more information in the description of the repo, and then let it render down here. Let me go back to the beginning page. We've now set up our portfolio to work with React Router. But with React Router, you can also use loaders to load data instead of using use effect hooks. To set up a loader in React Router, we need to go to our rendered components. We have our profile component, our projects component, and our project detail. And what we're seeing right here on this page is our profile component. Let me go to my profile component. And what I will be doing there, I will be replacing this use effect hook with a React Router loader. And not only will this save me a lot of code, it would also make sure that whenever my component renders on this route, the data will be fetched before the component is being rendered. So this will make it way faster to load my pages. I only need to create a new function that I also need to export, because I will be using this function from the component where I set up all my routes, which is index.js. Export async function loader. It doesn't take any values for now. And it should return the information that I want to render on this page. So what I will be doing, I will be taking my try-catch function from the use effect hook, and I will be copying this inside my loader function. I won't be using any functions to set the state. Instead, if there is a positive result, I will just return my results like this. I will set profiles equal to result. And then whenever there's an error, I can return a error object. Just return error. And it probably would be more convenient to rename this to result, and this to result as well. And then rename this to profile, and do it like this. Let me clean this file up a bit and save it. What I need to do second is I need to go to my index.js file where I've set up all my routes. And for my profile component, I will be importing the loader as well. And I need to make sure to rename this, because otherwise I will be having multiple loaders, which is confusing. I want to import loader as my profile loader. And then on my path right here, I want to set the loader to equal profile loader. And once I save this, it will start getting the data for me using the loader. I need to make sure that I make this a lowercase l. Now if I would go to my application in a browser, not much has changed, because the profile is still loading. It's being loaded using React Router, but it's also loaded using my use effect hook, which is still there in place. What I want to do, inside my profile.jsx component, I want to use the hook to get the information from the loader. And this hook is called use loader data that I can import from React Router DOM. Use loader data. And then what else can I do? I can actually delete all this code that I have right here, all my setState function. I can delete my useEffect hook. And this will all be replaced by a call I can do from the use loader data hook. And this would have my profile information. Use loader data, like this. And then my loading is no longer needed because React Router will make sure that my component will only be rendered if I have data. So what I could have though is error. So let me just say error is probably empty. But yeah, I might be in a situation where errors can occur. Something went wrong. If I would save this, I would still be able to see the same page, unless this time the data would come from, the data would be fetched by React Router instead by my useEffect hook. Which is kind of nice because it saves me a lot of code, and I already have my React Router in place, so why not let it handle data fetching for me as well? And of course you can do this for all the components you have. So we're using a profile loader for a profile component, you would have a projects loader for your projects component, and then you would have a projects detail for your project detail component. And this is actually a funny one because this one would take a parameter. So what we can do, we can set up a loader for this specific component. Let's skip projects for now because it's just the same as profile, but with a different endpoint. Let me go to project detail. And in here, we also will be setting up a loader component or a loader function. We call this export async function loader. And this time you will see it will take some params. Let me close it. Let me take the try catch function again that we have here. Make sure to copy it and delete all the code that we're not using, which is quite a lot. Delete this. Let me delete all this as well. And I will get back here later on. What I will be doing now is I will be pasting this right here. I have my try catch. Let me actually put this up here as well. So we have a parameter that has a value called name, which of course is the value it takes from the URL parameters. Let me rename this and this to be result. Just looking a bit nicer. And then let me call this one or project because it's a single project. And then if we have a project, we want to return this project so it can be rendered on this page. Like this. If we have an error, we probably want to return the error instead. I can save this. So my loader has the param right there. If I scroll down, I need to get this information from my use loader data hook again. I can do const project and get this information from use loader data, which of course I need to import from React Router DOM. And I can actually delete the use params as this information should now be available from my loader instead. I can also delete this useEffect hook, which I'm no longer using. So use loader data and delete this part here. And for name, I can just go with project.name as the information should be available right there. And my is loading, I no longer have this variable instead. I'm checking for an error. And if I have an error, I want to return something went wrong. An error could exist on my use loader data as well. And again, I don't have a loading variable any longer because with React Router, I know for sure that my data is fetched before my component is being rendered. So if I would save this, my application will be rendered again. If I would go to the browser, I can go to my main application. From there, I should be able to click on through all my projects, which is still being fetched using use effect hook. But if I click on any of the projects, it should use React Router DOM instead. You can see I have an error. Let me go to my component, use project detail, and see what's going on. I'm importing use loader data from React Router DOM, and I'm using it in here as well. Am I mistyping some things? I might. I actually forgot to hook up my loader right here. So what I need to do, I need to go to project detail, and I need to import the loader as project detail loader. And then I need to connect my project detail loader to my path for the projects /name. And when I would go to my application in the browser, it should get the information for my specific project using React Loader instead of using the use effect hook. So that's it. That's the live stream for today. And in this live stream, we created a portfolio application based on my book React Projects. Today, we built the second chapter of 10 chapters in total. And in every chapter, we'll be building a new project. So when I'm live streaming chapter 3, you can expect a new project to be built. So make sure to like this video if you enjoyed the live stream, or subscribe to my channel to be updated when the next live stream starts. Thanks